Ada Darho is the name of this chapter. I remained all of the new moon among the Mohawk nation. They had now accepted me as one of their own. As I had hoped, the Flint people proved the first to agree to join a confederacy of tribes, provided I could secure the willingness of the other Iroquois nations. Curiously, Hiawatha was more interested than any other in my mission. Late into the evenings, long after the others had retired, he and I would remain to converse around the fire. As the weeks passed, we came to share a common vision. When the time arrived for my departure, Hiawatha asked if he could accompany me. He made excuse for his former behavior by saying that he had fallen into a deep and black despair, because his wife and children had been devoured by a monster-like human being called Adadahar, who was the terror of the whole region in which he roamed like a wild beast. According to Hiawatha, Adadahar was not the many-headed serpent that some believed, but he was just as vile, a wicked sorcerer of twisted body and mind, who ate human flesh and hunted men as if they were animals. Though reports on the nature and appearance of Adadahar did not often agree, and Hiawatha himself had never seen him, tales of Adadahar had been told as far away as the Lake of the Michigan. Not a warrior from any of the nations that inhabited the northeastern forests would dare to journey into the dangerous vale where this twisted demon was believed to reside. Since my work with the Mohawks was for the time complete, and the region in which Adadahar roamed was in the general direction of the Oneidas, whom I next intended to visit, Hiawatha and I set out together on the journey, planning on our way to pay the murderer a call. The Mohawks thought it foolish to intentionally seek out Adadahar. Still, they respected us both and wished us well. They assumed that if we were not killed in the encounter, then we would surely kill Adadahar, for the presence of his evil was a menace to all the people thereabouts. However, there is a spark of the Great Spirit in every creature that draws breath. Without mentioning the reputed snake-haired demon by name, I spoke with Hiawatha on the journey to Adadahar's vale, of those times when strong and certain communication is able to accomplish more than the cruelty of violence. When you simply destroy that which you cannot understand, I told him, it will come back to you again and again and again, each new form worse than the previous. But if once you can understand what motivates your enemy, you can often help him discover superior ways of accomplishing his deeper purposes. "But you will never get such as him to listen to you," exclaimed Hiawatha, knowing full well what I implied. "All he understands is the tomahawk. He is not a creature with whom you can speak logically. He understands only violence. That is the only language he knows. The language he speaks to every man, woman, and child that crosses his path. I would do away with him, Digenoinda, not for revenge, for you have helped me soothe those self-defeating fires, but for love. I would do away with Adadahar to free others from falling into the same fate that he wreaked so thoughtlessly upon my family." And so we talked during our journey toward the vale in which this monster lived, and we made a plan. I proposed that I feign some sickness or affliction and try to secure the help of this Adadahar murderer, while Hiawatha watched us from a distance, his bow strung and ready to fire. My contention was that if this man had even the smallest spark of goodness in him, he would come to my aid and give me a basis for further communication. If not, if he turned on me, I would let Hiawatha have his way. What happened proved better than either of us could have planned. As I lay calling for help from behind a fallen tree, not far from the coals of Adadahar's last camp, the dreaded curse of the region came limping toward me with only the vile look of murder on his face. He approached cautiously at first, but when he saw me lying on the ground, pleading for a drink of water, he relaxed his manner. He looked carefully at the craftsmanship of my buckskin vest and leggings, which were, thanks to the Mohawks, newly made and of the very finest quality. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he raised his tomahawk for the kill. But Hiawatha surpassed my expectations, for instead of shooting him, he leapt upon Adadehar from behind and knocked the weapon from his grizzled hand. In the same moment I rolled, threw Adadehar off balance, then drove upon him, pinned him to the ground, and held him twisting, writhing, and spitting curses. In less time than it takes to tell it, Hiawatha, a true marvel in action, quickly bound his hands and feet. Before he knew what had come upon him, Adadehar sat at our mercy, disarmed, propped against the base of a tree. In a taunt bow, Hiawatha held an arrow trained upon his heart. It was then, for the first time, that we truly saw this man whom all the tribes despised. His body was crooked and twisted, deformed from some hideous disease. Yet his muscles, if somewhat grotesque, were nevertheless enormous. He exuded a strength in no way diminished, but somehow increased by his deformity. Though Hiawatha might have felt both emotions, there was evident not a trace of either anger or compassion as he spoke. "Adadehar," he said, speaking slowly and clearly, so that the word quivered with a power not unlike the power of his taunt bow. "Listen well, Adadehar, for I have you where your life is no longer your own." And then, in grim detail, Hiawatha gave an account of the discovery of his murdered family. Throughout Hiawatha's narrative, Adadehar's countenance remained hard and set. He was no doubt certain at the end of this lecture he would feel that arrow penetrate his chest. But when Hiawatha finished recounting these events that had happened to his most loved ones, he suddenly threw his bow off into the bushes. Disgusted with violence in all its spiteful forms, savagely holding the arrow in both his hands, he confronted the deformity tied to the base of the tree. With every muscle in his body taut, he held the arrows only inches away from the hateful face. And then Hiawatha did a wonderful thing. He looked Adadehar in the eye and said, "I will forgive you and spare your life, but I ask that you do one thing for me in return. Listen to my friend Digandawinda. Consider what he has to say." With that, he snapped the arrow in two and laid its broken pieces upon the ground in front of the astonished Adadehar. Hiawatha turned to me then and asked me to speak, but my heart was too full. I shook my head in motion for him to continue. Then, for the first time, from the lips of another, I heard my own teachings. Once again, Hiawatha amazed me. He spoke beautifully, poetically, eloquently, of the brotherhood of all creatures, four-footed, two-footed, winged. He spoke of the sacredness of human life, the joys of human friendship, the benefits that come to those who live together in peace and harmony and cooperation. With eloquence far greater than I had ever achieved, and with a passion I recognized as springing from the same source as my own, Hiawatha spoke to that twisted ruin who had once been a man. And when he spoke of the benefits of a peaceful heart, I could feel peace flowing out from his own heart in great soothing waves. I believe Hiawatha could have moved even the stones to sing when he told of the joy that fills the peaceful hearts of those who love the Great Spirit and live in accordance with nature's laws. At first, Adadehar listened in disbelief, looking for some kind of trap. But Hiawatha read his thoughts and seemed to address his questions and doubts even before they were spoken. As I watched, I realized that Hiawatha was a master at discerning the subtle meaning behind the slight twitches of Adadehar's face and the occasional movement of his eyes. As Hiawatha told the story of my falling into the gorge, the countenance of Adadehar began to change. A dim comprehension grew behind his expression. For the first time, Adadehar spoke. His words were broken and halting. His face wore a puzzled look. He questioned Hiawatha regarding the location of the tree, for it had